Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so excited to be here today because WorkflowCon was legit my favorite virtual conference of last year. So it is truly an honor to participate this year. I am hoping that you're all here to learn about how to break this longstanding divide that exists between bookkeepers and tax practitioners. I don't think it's a stretch to say it doesn't serve anyone well. And I know from personal experience that it can be addressed in a way that benefits both parties. And ultimately, the biggest winner is the small business clients we're all trying to care for. So by the time that our session together ends, what I'm hoping is that you will feel inspired to collaborate, recognizing it may feel like it, but it's not an insurmountable task. And I'd like to start by hearing who all's in the room here. So we've got a poll. If you go to the right-hand side of your screen, oh, I'm seeing all the hearts. I didn't realize there were emoji in here. That makes me feel so good. Thanks, y'all. There's a little poll section on the side of the screen, and one of the polls, where is it, says, do you identify as a bookkeeper, tax pro, or both? And if everybody could go ahead and fill that out, I'm going to see if I can share that. Oh, this is so much fun. Look at this. So looking in the room, okay. Oh gosh, we've got a lot of bookkeepers and a lot of both. Oh, that's awesome. Very few folks who are doing only taxes. Okay, this is fantastic. I'm going to leave this up for a couple moments more to make sure that we've got everybody represented here. Representation is important. And the reason I'm asking this question is that some folks, they're within a firm, a larger firm that does all tax, and some folks are within a larger firm that does all bookkeeping or client accounting services, CAS. And some folks are independent and they do just books or just tax. And some people are independent and they do both. So there are a lot of different there are a lot of different ways that this can be arranged, that these relationships can end up playing out. And the information I'm going to share with you today applies to all of those. So I am going to close this poll and let's move on to the next poll, which is, let's see, make sure we can do this. Are you an independent practitioner or are you part of a larger firm or team? This is really fun because so far with both of these, we're looking at pretty much 50-50, which is perfect because I was trying to get people in the room together. So this makes me really happy. All right, looks like we're skewing toward independent. We're more like 60-40 here. This is great. Let's make sure everybody gets represented. Lots of independent folks, lots of folks within a firm. Awesome. Okay. Well, this is very helpful. This is very helpful. We have one more poll at the end, but I'm going to jump back. I'm going to close this one and jump back to the presentation. All right. Hopefully my slides are back up. All right. So not only is this helpful for me, but I am actually also hoping that you can use this opportunity at WorkflowCon. You know how you just saw that there's like 50-50 there in the room. There's some not many solo tax pros, but we've got a lot of folks that do both bookkeeping and tax, and we've got a lot of folks that are doing just bookkeeping. Connect with each other in the chat. Like use this opportunity to see who's out there, who you might be able to collaborate with, because the kind of people who are self-selecting to attend a session like this, these are people who probably want to make things better. So connect with each other in the chat and go ahead and get started collaborating already. This is also a good time to note that if you have a question for me, I'm planning to have a few minutes at the end to address them. Please put them in the Q&A section and not in chat because, like I said, I was here last year. I know how cray the chat gets at WorkflowCon. I will never find it that way. So make sure that you're clicking the little Q&A. And also you can upvote in there. I don't know if you knew that you can upvote. So if somebody else asks a question that you're like, heck yeah, I want to know more about that, you can click the upvote on it. And that's the order in which they're going to show for me at the end. So I mentioned that I know from personal experience how challenging this divide can be. So you probably want to know, who the heck am I? My name's Nancy, and I run my own bookkeeping, tax, accounting, and advisory firm, The Dancing Accountant, for 23 years now. I know, I don't even look that old, but I have. It's true. I started as a bookkeeper, and then I branched out into tax. Then I got my master's when I wanted to tackle advisory work. And only then did I become a CPA. So this means I've experienced how differently a bookkeeper gets treated at conferences by licensed tax pros. Anybody familiar with that experience? Yeah, maybe differently isn't the best word, but to be honest, it's not a great feeling, right? So that is why I started Ask a CPA, a non-judgmental space for bookkeepers to ask a CPA things they can't necessarily talk about with their client's tax pro for whatever reason. We got a lot of Ask a CPA members at the Workflow Con here, so show some love to each other in the chat. I'm so glad that y'all are here. I also have all these very impressive credentials, but more importantly, if you're wondering, yes, I'm a dancer. And if you join us at the main stage immediately after this session, you will understand why on earth I am wearing sequins right now. Definitely my first time presenting a webinar in sequins. So why? Why collaborate? It's time consuming. It takes energy and it requires vulnerability. It is so much easier to just avoid it and stick with the way we've always done it. So for bookkeepers, this means I'm just categorizing things the way the client says to. The tax preparer can deal with this or that, right? That's a thing that happens a lot. For tax pros, this means I'm going to have to do all sorts of cleanup because the bookkeepers don't know what they're doing. Yeah, believe me, I have heard every imaginable scenario from both sides at this point, and I promise you, it's all avoidable. I have a friend who used to work at a firm that did both tax and bookkeeping, and the two departments did not get along at all. They were constantly complaining to each other about the idiots over there in the next department. So, to solve this issue, the partners decided to move their desks into the same space so they're all mixed up with each other, right? They didn't do anything else. They didn't set expectations or create workflows or provide education or establish regular meetings or anything. They just moved their desks around so that they were intermingled, which turned out to mean that they now had to walk across the room to complain about each other. I know, right? So my point is that without creating systems and expectations and shared resources, like things that actually make collaboration possible, it doesn't matter where you're sitting or whether you're in the same office. Everyone needs this. And the first step to making it happen is understanding why you should even bother. So first off, your clients, your common client's best interest, the client that you're sharing together, those are supposed to be the end goal. Ultimately, we all want the best clients we can get, and we want to retain them, right? My friend Gaynor always describes accountants as helpers. We want to make sure that they're taken care of and that the work that we're putting into like protecting them from shooting themselves in the foot, that's kind of how I feel my relationship with my clients is. We want to make sure that that work pays off. And when we work as a team, we're way more likely to make this happen. It's also easier for everyone if we set clear expectations and execute them before busy season. So you see, I'm not sure if the bookkeepers in the room realize this or not. Apologies if you already know this, but taxes are getting harder, like way harder. An average small business owner's tax return these days takes us like about 60% longer, I would say, than it did 6 years ago. 60% longer. I am not kidding. And just to make sure I'm clear about this, tax season was already awful. It was terrible compared to the rest of the year. And now it's taking us 60% longer to prepare the average return. So that means that for many of us, an hour during tax season, it's worth like, I don't know, if you take into account the fact that it was like already awful to begin with and now it's this much worse, it's like 1 hour during tax season is worth like 3 or 4 in the off season. So tax preparers want to, they don't know this, but they should. We need to learn this. You want to maximize that time outside of busy season to set yourself up for success during tax season. And it's also better for bookkeepers, right? Because especially if you can work the tax pros requests and preferences into your monthly closing workflow. So for example, reconciling payroll benefit accounts. That's one that we used to do once a year. And now we can keep an eye on that all year long. Or determining whether something's a capital asset or an expense. You don't have to wait until the end of year. You can figure that out and request the receipt from the client and figure that out during the course of the year, right? So that you're not scrambling to do cleanup while you're also sending out 1099s and addressing issues from the 25 other different preparers that you work with, all who want you to do it differently. Thirdly, successful collaboration leads to future referrals and work with responsible partners. I am going to take a wild guess here and presume that we all like working with the good ones and not so much with the not so good ones, right? So that goes for both sides of this wall. We want to send our clients to work with the bookkeepers that just rock at what they do. And they want to send them to tax preparers who do quality work and care about the client's big picture, not just once a year compliant engagement. And I'm going to add a runner up, which is that work is more enjoyable when we remember that the other person is human too. I'm not going to dive any deeper on that one, just going to let you think about that for a moment. So hopefully, if you weren't before, you are now convinced that collaborating is worth it. But now we have to figure out how to do it effectively, which means creating a workflow. It's like planning ahead to tear down the wall instead of just bringing in the wrecking ball. And this is where my own company's struggles really come into play. Our main issue was that although we'd hired amazing team members to handle the bookkeeping and trained them well, some of them are here today. I love you. I love you so much. Hi. Thank you. So they know that we'd never written a procedure or checklist that contained what all they needed to do on an annual basis. Like maybe that sounds obvious, but I had never written it down. So what do they need to do on an annual basis before a client QBO file could be deemed like officially ready to hand off to the tax team? So the CPAs were going through and making sure that XYZ had happened. So for example, confirming that the 1099K was the same or lower than the adjusted sales total. That's a thing that we do that's important. And we would check it. And if it hadn't been done, we would do it ourselves. This was not only totally inefficient, especially since it's possible or maybe even likely that the bookkeeper had already done a tie out to the point of sale system, which gets you most of the way there, but they just hadn't shared their work papers, right? So we're duplicating their work. So it wasn't only inefficient, but it was also taking up valuable time when Julie and I could least afford it. So one year, I finally wrote up an SOP, and wow, were things so much better. And then once we had that, it gave us the clarity to be able to see that we'd also never stopped to look at what they weren't doing as a matter of course, as in like there was no expectation for them to do it. But the tax team always ended up having to address before preparing a return anyway. So like things that honestly I'd never really thought of as a bookkeeper's job. Like some examples are making sure owner compensation was separated from the rest of the staff. That's something you have to do for a tax return for reporting, right? It never occurred to me that that was something that like the bookkeeper could take care of beforehand, and we didn't have to go in and do that. Another example, confirming everything in the donations account was actually a 501c3. We were spending time during tax season doing that instead of having the bookkeepers do that. And even more so, why not have the bookkeepers do that every month? You don't have to wait until the end of the year to do that, right? So I had always been both a bookkeeper and a tax pro, right? So where did that line get drawn? I never really thought about who could do these things that's not a tax preparer during their busiest time of year. So I realized we needed to eagle eye the work we were doing before we felt a return was ready to be prepared and pick out all the items that would be better off in the hands of the bookkeepers who were doing the annual closing. And that meant we had to decide who was responsible for what. Now, that's going to look different if your firm is doing both bookkeeping and tax than if you're doing the bookkeeping and handing it off to another party for tax prep. That's not going to look the same. In that latter situation, if you're doing the bookkeeping and you're handing it off to another party for tax prep, I beg you, involve the client in this discussion because ultimately these responsibilities, they land in their lap, the client's lap, if things fall through the cracks. And they shouldn't be absolving their duties, they should be delegating. But that's really hard to do when they don't know what all needs to happen in the first place, right? Like they started their own business because they were really good at acupuncture, not because they were like really good at knowing everything that has to happen for bookkeeping and tax prep, right? So you need to educate them on what has to happen in the first place. It is even harder when they don't know what's supposed to happen in the first place. And then the tax pro says something's the bookkeeper's job, but the bookkeeper never got the memo because the tax pro never said to the bookkeeper, this is an expectation I have of you, right? That's happened. I'm sure that has happened to everyone in this room. Or maybe it was really the client's responsibility, but the tax pro didn't know that. So getting together to make an accountability chart here would be an amazing way to handle it. Secondly, one thing that I see so often with clients as well is that even when we're all being really good about doing what we think needs to be done, if we don't communicate that it has been taken care of, chances are someone else is going to waste their time reproducing our work, right? Because they don't know. So even just having a checklist with due dates that everyone agrees upon that gets included with any notes or work papers that might be helpful, it makes a huge difference. And when creating a workflow, an essential piece of the puzzle is noting where the source documents can be found. This one should be easy, right? Right? Yeah, it's not. It's not easy, especially when it's two different firms. It's not easy, but it's an essential piece of the puzzle. So kind of like with number 2, it's easy to come back and say, well, why didn't you just ask for the bank statement or W-2s or whatever? But I promise, when you haven't slept for weeks or you're desperately trying to get something out the door because the client needs it for like a line of credit renewal or whatever the case may be, FAFSA, it's just hard not to be snippy about it or to just be like, it's easier if I just go digging myself. So everyone on the team knowing where each source document and reconciliation related to each balance sheet and P&L account can be found, that is pure gold. So we've got our why. We know the components of a good workflow. So how do we do it? What tools can we use to tear down this wall? Now, you probably guessed that I would start with a project management system. We're literally at the Financial Sense Workflow Con, right? And it is true that using software like Financial Sense can make a huge difference here, no lie. But I don't want you to get stuck in the classic game that we play in our firm of not doing anything because we're not ready to do the big thing. right? We're not ready to research all of the different programs that are out there, or we found the one we want, but we're not ready to implement a system. Yes, taking all the components I talked about in the last couple slides and feeding them into your PM and inviting the bookkeeper to the tax pros PM or the tax pro to the bookkeeper's PM. Yes. If you have the bandwidth to make that happen, then like, dude, get on it. That's like the gold standard of tools to make this all happen. But it can be as simple as starting with the accountability cheat sheet that I talked about, or a flow chart that you put together, and that the amazing meeting with a small business owner, bookkeeper, and tax pro. Remember the one I was just talking about? Yes. So you can take that and you can split it out by role. Then you have your to-do list. You can export the financial statements to Excel and create a notes column with info on the account reconciliation or on the transactions in the PL. And that gets handed off with your supporting work papers and source docs. So for us, we have a checklist in Excel that Sarah, one of our incredible team members, she made based off of my SOP. And the financials and the work papers are each a separate tab in the workbook. And yes, your annual review process should for sure be a part of this. And so Kendra, our senior accountant, she worked with Sarah to make sure that all of the things our senior accountant wants to see at the end of the year before she's handing it off to the tax team are in there as well. We have a checklist in Ask a CPA based on our own internal system that I encourage the folks in our group to work into whatever method they are already using to track project management. I'm also guessing that a lot of people on this call use Keeper, right? Shout out to Keeper, which we use and love. And it pairs great with lots of PM systems out there, including Financial Sense. If you want to use it to improve the month-end close process, but keep your workflow management in a PM, which is really common scenario, Keeper even gave us tips on how to make it work best with each of the PMs when we were evaluating what to use. So they're awesome. I love that team. The point is, you need to have a way to track what needs to be done and who's doing what and by when. And though that's what project management systems are designed to do, don't think you can't improve on what you already have if you're not really ready to take that step today. Secondly, meetings. Yes, this means you. I am talking to you. I know you don't want to. You know I'm talking to you. I know y'all think it costs too much time and energy to set up regularly recurring meetings between the tax pro and the bookkeeper. But I promise it is an investment. It saves you time and money in the long run. It does not cost you. Even just having a couple meetings to define roles, set up an accountability chart, and discuss the most effective ways to communicate with each other can reap massive rewards. And having a quarterly check in before calculating estimated taxes is even more effective. There are so few standards in charts of accounts or how a tax preparer likes to see certain numbers. Like this was when we got in Ask a CPA, where to book actual vehicle expenses when they're paid by the company, but it's not 100% business use. It's a classic. Like almost no two tax preparers want to see that in the same place, right? That's a conversation that you need to have. So imagine being able to make your preferences clear and have them respected. Most bookkeepers are looking for guidance, but they don't get it. And thirdly, education. Both sides of this divide thrive on having education and resources that resonate with their real life needs. A good example is a list of what bookkeepers want tax pros to know and vice versa, which we crowdsourced with Jason Stats and my Ask a CPA members. Check out episodes 306 and 307. He even gives us a shout out. And at Tax Twitter Retreat, I gave a presentation, and then afterwards with the tax pros there, we built this Jeopardy board. It's actually above me on top of my bookcase back there with post-it notes for each category on what they want bookkeepers to know in order to collaborate better, which was totally a blast and super helpful. For bookkeepers, obviously, there's my Ask a CPA group as a resource, but I also recommend taking IRS annual tax filing season certification. I have a colleague who has her whole staff do it every year, even her receptionist, right? So not even just the people who are doing taxes, everyone. You will learn so much about becoming a better bookkeeper the more you learn about tax. Also, Ask your tax pro partners for an FAQ or a training, or at least what their biggest pain points are. For tax pros, please get your QuickBooks Online Accountant Pro Advisor certification. If your clients are on QBO, please do this. Don't cram everything into a tax adjusting journal entry. There are proper workflows, and skirting them can mess up managerial reporting and subledgers. Also, please don't, please don't change the books without coordinating with the bookkeeper to make sure it's the correct approach. And as I mentioned above, consider writing up an FAQ for your bookkeeper partners. Take the time to learn what it is that bookkeepers don't already know, right? Instead of criticizing them for it, be a resource to them. Instead of throwing the financial statements over the wall, let's create common ground by collaborating throughout the year. We can leverage technology and build systems to share information at the time it's most actionable rather than only at tax time when the pressure's on and it's too late to address certain types of problems like reasonable compensation or issues with benefits. I hope you're inspired to create a workflow that effectively communicates who's responsible for what, whether or not a task is complete, and where the source documents can be found. This process, whether internally at a CAS practice or between firms, it can replace the proverbial wall between practitioners with a workflow that's really accessible to everyone. So, who wins when we tear down the wall? Bookkeepers, tax preparers, and most of all, our clients. So now I've got another poll for you. Let me click back over here, see if my host is telling me. Okay, great. Got some questions in the Q&A. Got to go to polls. So much activity going on here. After today's talk, do you feel inspired to reach out and collaborate? I'm going to show that on stage while I take a quick look at Q&A. All right. How is the CPA tracked and distributed for these sessions? I have no freaking idea. Sorry. No idea whatsoever. That's a financial sense workflow con question. Commented in the chat, but here is a question. As a tax person, I want to see the chart of accounts one way, but the bookkeeper client has it set another way. How can we communicate our needs to the bookkeeper? That is such an amazing question. It's probably the most important question to ask, which is, let's all get together for a meeting and let me communicate to you why I want to see it this way and why they want to see it that way, because chances are they don't even know. They don't even know that it's better for you this way, and they don't have any reason for it. As a matter of fact, it's like astonishing how many people are using the default chart of accounts that like comes in automatically when you set up a new QuickBooks Online file, and it's still got meals and entertainment in there. Meals and entertainment have to be two separate lines in the profit and loss because entertainment is no longer deductible and meals are 50% deductible. Those have to be two separate lines. Lots of folks are just using the default. So communicate. Just say, hey, can we have a meeting about this? Because this is actually really challenging for me. And unless you have a really good reason, which they might, then, let's change it. We've got 1 minute left. Let me see. When is tax season? That's a great question. Tax season is usually about the second or third week of January through the second week of April. That's what we think of as tax season. I collaborate so that the bookkeepers are aware and together we can better serve the clients. This helps reduce the time I have to spend on preparing returns. I agree. We've got a few questions left, but not enough time to get to them, unfortunately. But you can always pop over to the Ask a CPA booth. Oh, good. Everybody is feeling, we've got at least 2/3 of you are feeling like you're more prepared, more inspired, rather. Let's see. Let me get back to my slides here. I hope that you are feeling more inspired to collaborate. Your next step is to make it happen. Reach out to your client's tax pro or bookkeeper and start making plans to coordinate before year end. I would love to hear how it goes. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, or if you're a bookkeeper, please scan the QR code or swing by our Ask a CPA booth during one of the breaks. It's an honor getting to hear your stories. Have a wonderful rest of the conference. I'll see you on the main stage in a few minutes for a dance break. Whoop, whoop! Bye, y'all.